All right, welcome to the second episode of Desi Girl Sparkle. This episode is going to be centered around mental health and wellness. It's going to be broken up into two parts because I also want to get the men's perspective on men's mental health, and that will be the next episode. But for today, we're just going to focus on mental health and as it affects us in the South Asian community. So I am joined by Disha today and Juhi. Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being willing to be open and honest and to share your experiences with us.
No, thank you. Thank you for having us. Super
Yeah.
excited.
So we'll just start off with give us a little bit of background about yourselves and your experience with mental health or mental health disorders.
So I like to call it, if I introduce someone, give my pitch, I like to call it my trifecta. So I have anxiety, depression, and officially got diagnosed with ADHD in grad school. I feel like I had it in undergrad, but I kind of just pushed through it. I call it a trifecta because that's what makes me me. And I've been navigating it for many years in my life. Some have taken a toll. Like years were really down and bad, but I think finding ways to cope through those mental illnesses really has helped me. And therapy, huge advocate for therapy. I know we'll probably talk about therapy, but I advocate it for every member of my family or all my friends and to anyone because sometimes, yes, the therapist might not be the best fit, but sometimes the coping skills that they give you or like kind of the guidance they give you really helps in that time period or that you can carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I agree completely. I have had my fair share of experience with mental health. I think growing up in a South Asian household, mental health wasn't a concept that we even looked at. Like it was always, especially someone that was the older child within between myself and my sister, it was always like you have to be the perfect child, you have to be the golden child, do well at school, look a certain way. I was always a little, I wasn't the typical skinny brown person that everyone, would want their child to look like. So, I was always a little bit on the heavier side growing up. So, just growing up with that background, it, I guess, eventually led me to have anxiety, panic disorder, and depression at one point as well. I had no idea I had any of this. I knew all the symptoms, but I didn't realize I had this until I went away to college and when I wasn't living at home with my family. When I wasn't at home with my family, I think I became more aware of the symptoms that I was feeling, especially when it came to just school in general. It's like they always expected me to be the doctor in the family. The firstborn is going to be the doctor in the family because I used to say that growing up. Oh, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor until I get to
Mhm.
college. And I'm like, honestly, I don't see myself doing this. I
Yeah.
can't. And it turned into anxiety attacks, panic attacks. I couldn't breathe. I was nonstop crying. And I would never understand why. It made no sense to me until like I think I sat down with with one of my friends and they were just like, these are all symptoms of anxiety and panic disorder. And they kind of referred me to, the school counseling center that they had and I started getting therapy there. Also an advocate for therapy. And I think getting therapy really just opened new doors for me. It just introduced me to a world that I guess didn't exist while growing up in a brown household. And I think that helped me advocate not only for myself, but even for my younger sister who was apparently dealing with the same stuff at home while I was away at college.
Mm.
So just going through all that has just been, it's like going through all the stuff with school, then kind of going into like after graduating with school, going into adult life, getting into relationships, working. It's one thing after another. But I think one thing that has helped me become the person who I am today is realizing that I have to do something for myself. I can't do this stuff for other people. And whether
Yeah.
it's therapy, whether it's disconnecting from people, like it comes down to what you want to do for yourself, not doing things for other people. And I think in a brown household, like that is something that's heavily focused on doing things for other people.
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny because I feel like a lot of what you said I really resonate with. And I feel like my experience is like a combination of yours, Juhi, and yours, Disha. Like
Mm,
similarly, like I call my mental illnesses my cocktail of mental illnesses. Like I have PTSD, which started depression, anxiety, and very recently I was diagnosed with ADHD, which again, same like you, Disha. I kind of always thought I had it, but I didn't get the official diagnosis until a few months ago. And so it's so funny because I was very curious about like where did my depression start from? Did it start from the things that caused my PTSD. And recently I found old school diaries of mine from like second and third grade. And the way that I was talking about myself and like the way that I was like describing myself. I was saying really awful things about me, like, oh, I'm so ugly, or oh, I'm so fat. And I feel like, just like you said, Juhi, like being raised in a brown household, like you hear it around your house, you hear it at functions or other like society events, and it just kind of is stuck in your head. And that's how you kind of perceive yourself and move forward in the world. And so also third person here that's a big advocate of therapy, like it wasn't until therapy that I started to really realize these things and like start to look at myself in a different light and say like, hey, no, I'm not any of those things, and some of it's not bad. Like, yeah, I'm not skinny and there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's so much that came out during therapy that I don't think I would have gotten to understand about myself if I never started therapy. So, how did you talk to your family about your mental health and your mental health illnesses, and what was their reaction?
My mom, I would say, is quite a modern kind of mom, like South Asian mom, who she worked around really helped the conversation because she had non-Desi like coworkers. So they were like African American or Caucasian or like other Asian. And so having that conversation with her was kind of easier. And she is the parent that I kind of go to first for anything. She took it kind of, she was like, I understand in my own way because obviously she's not going to know what anxiety and depression technically what they mean, right? But I was just explaining like I'm short of breath or like I get overwhelmed and stuff, and she was like, oh wow, well like your dad does too, but in his own way, so it's like they've dealt with it in a relationship as a couple, but she's like, okay, my daughter is going through it now, like okay, I get it in her own way. So she's also a big advocate for therapy or any help that I need. As far as my dad, it was kind of harder for me to say, like, I'm going through depression or like I have anxiety because then he's like, oh, I'm depressed. Like, why are you depressed? And I'm like, we
Yeah.
can both be depressed. It's
Yeah.
okay. So I wish in the beginning that there was more understanding. Like, he's like, oh, okay, she is going through what I'm going through. But I think now it's gotten better. I will definitely say in the South Asian community, it's just hard to have that conversation. I'm grateful that my parents are kind of more on the modern side, but I know still to this day, like some parents don't want to hear about mental health and like suicide and suicide awareness or anything. So
Yeah.
it's like such a big taboo. Like, it might happen in the community, but no one will talk about it. But I'm like, no, we need to talk about it because we need
Yes.
to have prevention, and have a safe space for South Asians to go to. Something that I did also like is that our mandir had a youth group event and they had parents there and their children there. And they had kind of some kids that were in college. So I did attend. And this was me after college. And the children were like high school, beginning high school to middle school. And I was kind of a middle ground person in the group. And they're like, okay, like, what would you advocate for parents and what would you advocate for the kids? So I spoke on both terms. I'm like, parents, please have an open mind, and then children, like, try to go to your parents, be comfortable, like
Yeah.
it's okay to let them know, don't be afraid. And even let a friend know, let another youth group
Right.
member know. So it was a really good bridge because some parents really opened their eyes and they're like, wow, like they were really bottling that up. And I wish my child did tell me. So it was a really great experience.
Yeah. I think mine was exactly reversed. Like my dad is always my go-to person.
Cool.
And he's just easier to talk to because he's relatively open-minded, and he does a good job of like trying to understand no matter what the situation is. So it was a lot more tough for me to have the conversation with my mom. And
Mhm.
exact same thing like you said with your dad, right? Like she was just very confused of like, why are you depressed? I don't understand.
Right.
And so it took a while, but like just like you said, Disha, like it took some time on my part as well to be like, I need to take the time to sit with them,
Mhm.
walk them through it, talk to them about it, and say like, this is why this is happening and this is what it looks like for me. And it's just what it is. Like it's not something I'm
Right.
doing intentionally. It just exists like that.
Oh, I agree. And I think really similar to your point, like for me, honestly, growing up, I've always been close to my mom and I still am. But for some reason, this one specific topic, I couldn't go to her with it. Like, it was
Mm.
my dad that I approached, which honestly still shocks me till date to think that, like, my dad was the first person I told in my family that I was getting therapy and what I was going through. I remember, I think I was in my sophomore year of college, and that was the breaking point for me deciding, like, I can't go into med school. That's not something, I can do. I knew I wanted to be in healthcare. That's where I saw myself, long term, but I couldn't see myself going through the whole med school, becoming a doctor, all that stuff. I couldn't do that. And I went to my dad and I was like, look, dad, like, this is what's going on. I've been getting therapy because honestly, every time I sit down to do any type of work, I start panicking. I can't breathe. I start crying, hyperventilating, all the symptoms I listed it out for him. And I was like, but honestly, I'm so afraid of switching paths because mom's going to be disappointed. And
Yeah.
he literally was like, he's like, I'll handle mom. You do what you got to do. Just don't waste my money. That's literally what he told me. He's like, "Just don't waste my money." He's like, "Whatever you're gonna do, I know you're gonna be fine." And but he was like, "Don't worry about mom." And then it came down to me having the conversation with my mom, and it was that back and forth, like, "Why can't you do it? You've already told people," like the log kya kahenge type of thing that you
Right.
have in a brown house. Like, what are people gonna say? Like, you've already said you're gonna do this, and now you're changing your mind, type of thing. Like, that's not okay. Keep trying. Blah blah blah. Whatever it is. And then, like, it just got to a point where, like I said, my sister was going through her own stuff at home at that point when I was away from school. And I think as my sister was going through it at home, my mom started understanding it. She didn't
Mhm.
understand what I was explaining to her over the phone. But then when she saw my sister going through the same thing, she was like, wait, this is what Juhi explained to me. And then
Yeah.
she came back to me and she was like, you know what? She was like, I used to deal with the same stuff as I was growing up in India. But she was like, back in the day, she was like, they used to just, she's like, like my mom would just give me one slap and be like, all right, go do your work, type of thing. That's how they did it back in the 70s and 80s and while she was younger. So she was
Yeah.
like, now that I see it in both of my daughters, she was like, it makes more sense to me. She can see the connection as to where we actually kind of got it from, if anything.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like our parents wear that as like a badge of honor sometimes of like, oh, back in my day, like, we dealt with a lot of shit, but like we grew up, we like put our big boy pants on
Right.
and moved on. And it's like, well, that's not healthy though, because you didn't process what you went through. Like some of the things that my
Right.
parents have told me individually about what they've gone through in their lives, I'm like, you need to process that in therapy because that is insane. And you've just kind of moved on from it and pretend like it didn't happen. And that just it doesn't work like that. You have to process a lot of this stuff. But again, like these terms didn't exist back then and they didn't have a
Right.
name for it. And even now, some people don't really want to name what it is.
Yeah,
Agree.
I
No,
agree.
it's absolutely that's what it is. And I think, after going through all that and moving into adult life, it's like then you come into this whole world of like relationships and dealing with other people besides just your family, and your friends and your colleagues, whoever it is. And to your point where like people don't recognize it or they don't want to recognize it, you see it in a lot of people, whether it's someone that you're dating, someone that you're talking to, someone you're committed to, whatever it is. I remember in most recently, my relationships, I think, are probably what shaped me to be who I am today. I think that those are what have taught me to have that boundary for myself. And even that,
Absolutely.
someone that you think is someone that's your age, someone that's more modern, to see them have that mindset where like, who cares about mental health, or like, oh, you're just making this up, type of thing. That really like is like, it's not, honestly, it's not even like the person, it's the community, honestly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what it is.
definitely. Yeah. And it's funny, there's a point that you made earlier, Juhi, where you said that, we're kind of like conditioned in our community to be
Mhm.
people that put others first or help others first. And it's again, it's worn as a badge of honor of like, oh, as Indian women,
Right.
as South Asian women, you're supposed to help others and put everybody else before you, whether it's your parents, your siblings, your in-laws, whatever. You're always last and you're always supposed to look at yourself last. It's
Right.
really like just now at this age, at 31, I'm learning like that's not healthy. I should be putting myself first. I should be thinking about myself. I should be taking care of myself.
Mhm.
Like it's something that just doesn't happen. So
Right.
what is it that you guys do to kind of take care of yourselves or support yourselves through all of this?
I wouldn't say I scheduled them, but I definitely like once a week will have like 1 or 2 hours just to myself. Like we have some fur babies, I have a husband, I have a mom that like we're all in this one house, but I'm like, I just want 2 hours, just me, myself, and I just do either my nails or like listen to music. And I'm a very sentimental person. So I will put on sappy music and just cry sometimes and just let that out. Or I will order in food or just like have that time for myself because with therapy, even like, and that's a whole different session that I have, but like that therapy, in therapy, I've learned like that session of me sitting by myself, it really lets me be me and just like get everything out that I need. And then I can process everything else. Like I will
Yeah.
journal sometimes because I don't have the right words. Like sometimes when in my relationships, even with my mom or my husband, they're like, "What's wrong?" But I stop myself. Like I can't say what's wrong sometimes. And I'll just write it down and I'm like, "Okay, you guys can read this. That's what's wrong." And then it's just an easier way for me to explain it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say definitely setting myself some time just for peace and quiet because with anxiety, I overthink. And when I overthink, it's not the best. I'm overthinking like plan B, plan C, plan D.
Mhm.
So it's like
Right.
overwhelming. So I'm like, okay, just relax, shut off your brain. It will try to, but yeah, that's what's helped me so far.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Honestly, I suck at like expressing my emotions. And I don't know, again, I don't know if this is because I was always the older child, so I wasn't supposed to, display my emotions or display that I was upset. Even till date, even if I'm like talking to someone now, my parents, my family, whoever it is, the first thing, especially if it's someone new, the first thing I'll tell them is they'll be like, sometimes you just look so like disconnected. And I'm like, I'm not disconnected. I just, trust me, I can connect. I just can't express my emotions. I have the
Yeah.
hardest time being able to do that. My way to do that is to write. And I write letters. I guess that's kind of like my love language in the sense where, like, if I need to tell someone what's going on, I'll write everything out in a letter, be like,
Yeah.
here, read this. And I mean, to your point, like, I think with my work schedule and just my other commitments in life, I'm still single. So right now, it's really just work and school. I'm getting my doctorate. Sometimes I feel like I don't have time to even breathe for myself because it's just a go, go, go schedule. 2 hours of commute to work in the morning, 2 hours commute in the evening. Then you're working for 10 hours. Then you're doing school when you come home. Then you have to socialize with your family. It's a lot. So, in
Yeah.
that point, I'm just like, people are just like, where do you get time for yourself? And I was like, honestly, me driving is my time to myself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Me taking my train to work, that's my time to myself. And if I don't pick up your call, don't be offended. That's really just the time that I've set aside for myself.
Yeah. And there's so much pressure to like feel like you have to answer someone's phone call or like
Exactly.
where I get off of work, I need to make sure I call my parents or I need to make sure
Mm-hmm.
I do this or I talk to this
Right.
person and you struggle to find that time for yourself.
Right. And I think a part of me would always, it used to feel bad and be like, oh my
Mhm.
God, I'm so sorry. Like, and I'll text them and be like, oh my God, I can't pick up because ABC. And then I sat with myself one day and I was like, I don't owe anyone an explanation. I
Yeah.
don't. I'm allowed to not pick up the phone. And
Yeah.
everyone in my family and my friends know, like, I'm a terrible texter. So I tell them if it's urgent, call me. And if you
Yeah.
call me more than once, that's when I'll know it's important. But if I don't pick up on the first call, I'll call you back. It's not that I'm not going to call you back. And for me, like, because I struggle with my emotions, it's also very hard for me to react in certain situations. So, and I'm still working on it. I've done my fair share of therapy, I've done my fair share of work on myself, and I still have a hard time when it comes to, like, crying in front of people. I can't do that. Or even crying on my own. I can't do that sometimes. But
Yeah.
when it does come out, it comes out like, it I would have never dealt with it before type of thing. So I'm still working on those things. And I think it's a work in progress, right? Like, even though I have these things for myself, it's not always going to be perfect. There's always going to be ups
Yeah.
and downs.
Yeah. And I think that's also really important is that for people to understand that, mental health, it's not linear. It's not something where, you have this issue, you go to therapy, it's solved and you're good for the rest of your life. It doesn't work like that. It's
Right.
it's up and down. As you go through life, you'll experience different situations, different things that may bring something else up, and it's constant work. Like you're constantly having to work on yourself, constantly having to be like, I thought I had moved past this, but I guess not. So let's circle back on it. How has boundary setting played a part in your mental health?
I think I'm still learning how to set those boundaries because sometimes I guess just in my household, if I say like, no, I can't do this, like my parents will get offended or people get offended. I'm like, I'm sorry. You're just saying I have to say no because pushing I've before in the past pushed myself too much and I've burnt out. like, it does affect everyone else around me, and I don't mean it to, but, like, what else, can I do at that point, And I
Yeah.
think they also realize it's like, "Okay, she does do much," And I've had to advocate for myself because they'll be like, "Oh, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do that?" I'm like, "No." You could Google it, Sometimes our parents
Hmm.
they're reverting to, like, a baby in a way. It's
Yeah.
like, you can look up that 1-800 number, call,
Right.
customer
Yeah.
service, like, do it your own way. So, I think I'm still learning, like, what's the appropriate way to say it because sometimes I can lash out. I'm also the eldest daughter and, like, I get put a lot on me, so I'm like, I lash out and I don't like that. That's something I'm working on myself, but when I lash out, I'm like, I shouldn't have said that,
Yeah.
And I do apologize afterwards, but I think
Yeah.
boundary setting is a work in progress, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think I'm the same way. I think I always had a difficult time saying no up until I got in my last relationship.
Mm.
Honestly, if being with that in that toxic narcissistic relationship, I think that's what taught me my boundaries because I went from someone that, when I was in this relationship, I would not speak to my family. I wouldn't speak to my friends. I was completely just cut off from everyone because I was trying to make something work that was not going to work. There was the whole spiel of being cheated on, being consistently, gaslighted, the whole 9 yards in that sense. And I think being in that, I was always trying to justify his actions rather than looking at what I can do to set my boundaries and say no,
Yeah.
whether it be like, well, Juhi, I'm on my way home from work right now. I want to talk to you right now. Even though I was sitting with family, it's like I was expected to stop hanging out with my family, go speak to him right away. I was not able to say no because it comes back to
Yeah.
that people pleasing part of it. So I
Yeah.
think after getting myself out of that situation and realizing what harm it actually did to me rather than bringing, betterment in my life at that point, I realized that I need to learn to say no, whether it's my family, whether it's my friends, whether it's someone I'm dating. Because at the end of the day, no one else is going to look out for me. I have to look out for myself.
Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
that's what it comes down to. I mean, recently I went on a trip to Spain with my mom, a couple of her friends, my sister, and because I was the only person that can speak Spanish, I was the go-to person to do everything. I planned the entire trip from the start. Even there, oh, Juhi, can you translate this? Can you do this? And at one point I was like, I don't feel like I'm on vacation. I feel like I'm at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it took me having to voice that for them to understand. And if this was me a year ago, I would have just kept going along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I like crash out because and then I feel bad afterwards, but it's like
Hmm.
I've taken on so much and I've said yes to so many things because I didn't want to upset anybody. And then when I'm in the middle of it, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm doing every single thing. Somebody else needs to step up. I can't do this.
Right.
And it's hard because like, same like you, Disha, I'm just now in kind of the process of learning how to set boundaries and how to tell my parents like, hey, you got that, you can figure it out yourself, or like, hey,
Right.
I really can't help with this right now, like it's
Hmm.
the middle of my workday, or I have this thing going on, I can't stop to do this. And I feel bad afterwards because it's like there's like this like guilt that you feel of like, oh well, they only asked for one little thing to help with, but then it's also like, where's the stopping point, right? Like if you're constantly saying yes, at what point do you get to say no? I'm curious to hear the men's perspective when we do that episode, but I'm curious if it's more of a South Asian woman thing versus the guys, if they feel that same sort of like boundary setting pressure or not. What do your support systems look like today?
I will say with my husband, we talked about this. So we're both the eldest in our family. And also the eldest, like, first grandchildren, first kind of like nieces and nephews and stuff, and we both like we'll see things on Instagram and we'll share it with each other. We both feel that pressure, that and I'm
Mm.
glad I had that conversation with him because it's like, am I the only one, like, because I'm the oldest, like, do I, because some of my girlfriends are the oldest, right? So like we'll talk about it, but I've never really talked about it with my husband until like this year, and I'm like, oh, it's interesting, like, it's good to know, like, he feels that pressure to, not good like that he does, but it's just good to be understanding and like, oh, okay, like, you feel it too, like, you're under pressure too. But about the support system, I would say it's really great at this moment. My husband's very understanding, when I have my therapy sessions and just giving my space. I think in relationships wise, with my anxiety in the beginning, it definitely took a big toll because I'm a big, like, I feel off energy. So if I feel an energy shift like at all, and I'm like, I start overthinking. I'm like, is everything okay? Like what's going on? But he's also a person, he's just like, just tell me, use your words, say anything you want. And he's just really acceptive, and he'll know how to like kind of cheer me up when I'm having bad days and everything. But he also gives me my space when needed. That did take a lot of conversations. It's like, what do you need? What do I need? Like how I like to receive that.
Right.
And then I would say that also with my mom, like she still advocates for therapy, and she's there if I need to talk it out. I would say it's really good right now. But before, it wasn't the best, obviously, because my dad being so like kind of butting heads, and he's like, no, like I didn't go through therapy, but I'm like, yeah, but you might have needed to, like try it
Yeah.
out.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
So I know he might, I don't know, but maybe those resources also weren't available. Like
Yep.
my parents
Right.
immigrated here and they just had to work. Like that's their
Yeah.
hustle. They had to work and there's
Absolutely.
no time.
Right.
Like they had two kids, they're trying to take care of their house. So that's also a barrier which I am working on, because me going through therapy, I think it's a generational thing. So like me going through
Yeah.
therapy, I'm trying to work on myself to be the best that I can be for my kids. And that's something I brought it to my therapist a few weeks ago, because I'm like, I do want children, but I don't want to pass down my generational trauma that I have had, from my
Yeah.
parents.
Absolutely.
So that
Right.
was a really big thing. And I'm like, I'm giving myself grace period, like a grace time to work on myself before that time comes.
No, I agree with you. This is a conversation I have with my sister where she'll be like, "We were loved growing up and we still are, but in a brown household, affection is not shown easily."
Yeah.
Like just like I have my friends, my best friend is Caucasian and like it's very normal for her mom to be like, "Bye honey, I love you," stuff like that. Like that's not something that we grew up with. Like,
Hmm.
now my dad will say things like, like, "My daughters aren't my daughters, they're my sons," and that really sat with me. That was probably one of the only compliments I got from him at one point, because it's not easy for them to say that because they didn't grow up with that. Love our parents, but I don't wanna raise my kids that way. Like, I want my kids to be used to hugging each other. I'm so weird when I get touched because I didn't get hugged growing up. And it's, and now if they come to hug me, I'm like, "What's wrong? What's going on?" You're not used to that. So I talked to my sister and she's like, when I grow older or when I have my own kids, I want to say I love them. I want them to know that it's okay to feel this and to say these things to each other. So,
Hmm.
Yeah.
it's so different. And again, like my support system, it took them a while to understand, but I have to say I'm very grateful for my family and my friends because if it wasn't for them, like I don't think I would be as strong as I am now. If it wasn't for them getting me through some of the situations that I dealt with in the last couple of years, like I don't even know how I would be coping with it at this point. I might still be trying to find ways to cope with it. So if it wasn't for them, I don't think I'd be the person who I am now. And not even that, I don't think I would have made so many of the connections that I had now. It's like you have
Yeah.
to go through these certain things to meet certain people, to make connections with certain people.
I had to kind of teach my parents to say I love you. Like it's past like
Mhm.
years or so. I would say it first, and then like we wouldn't hang up until they said it. And yeah, they were awkward in the beginning, but now it's just so rewarding hearing, like I'll hear my dad and mom talk and he'll say I love you, and I'm like, that's like he'll say to her and I'm like, oh my god. Like, I want our kids to know what love is, like how it's
Mhm.
received, all the
Right.
love languages they're gonna get, but whatever you want to receive, you can receive. I love you with my sibling too. Like, me and my brother fight so much, but I'm like, I love you, like
Yep.
showing that to him too.
Yeah, same experience my way too. I have an older sister and a younger brother, and they're kind of my first step support system. Now that I'm married, my husband's my first step support system, and he's wonderful. And similar to Neil, Disha, he's very understanding. He advocates for me more than I advocate for myself sometimes. He'll tell me like, "Hey, you really need to take some time for yourself," or like, "Just do some of your fun stuff that you like to do. Go back into scrapbooking or the things that make you happy." Because I tend to get lost in my day to day and forget about it. But my siblings, we are very close and they're always really helpful. And even if like we need to have a conversation with our parents about something and I might be a little hesitant to talk about it with them, I go to them first and we kind of come up with a plan together and then, we bring it to our parents. Affection wasn't a large part of our day to
Mhm.
day growing up, I've never seen my parents hold hands or kiss each other or anything like that. And so now, in the last couple of years, we've really been pushing them to be like, hey, go on date nights or like, go on vacation, do something fun together. And now it's like we see them holding hands sometimes and we're like, whoa, whoa, that is scandalous. Like, how did this happen?
No, I think, going based off of your point of saying, how close you were with your siblings, how you'd kind of talk to each other about those things, it was a little different for me and my sister. For us, we always butted heads growing up. I don't think it was
Mm,
until much recently where we actually, like, I think saw eye to eye in the sense where, like, for her, it was always like, oh, Didi's the favorite child. So she always felt like she was getting overlooked. And for me, I was always just like, why can't you just listen to them? So it was always that. And I think it wasn't until she saw what I was going through with my mental health where she thought it was a safe space for her to come to me and share she was going through. When I,
yeah.
I look back at that and I hear, things that you say, and it's like, for me, like, even now, my sister and I will fight, and like, she'll come back and be like, I'm sorry, I love you. And I'll just stand there and I'll just be like, yeah, I love you too. And she's like, you can't be more like, emotional about it. And I was like, I'm trying, I'm getting there, I'm
Yeah.
trying. It's honestly kind of refreshing to hear that you had, Anjali, you had that with your siblings, and you still do. So it is nice that at least there's someone in your family. So it's
Yeah.
nice to hear that.
Well, we definitely progressed to it. Growing up, I'm the middle child, right? So
Hmm.
my older sister, for a long time was kind of like a second mother, and she was, a perfect student, straight A's, and I'm sure she felt a lot of the same type of like expectations that you guys are saying you felt as an elder child. And so I constantly felt like I was having to compete with that and like I need to be as good as she is. I need to be as smart as she is. I need to
Hmm.
be as skinny as she is. Like, and I was struggling to be any of those things. And I think that also like definitely took a big hit on my mental health of like, she's set the standard for the household of what things need to look like. And I'm just not able to be that person. And so we definitely like butted heads for a bit as well. And I think after I went to college and started to really discover myself and discover who I am as a person and like accept who I am as a person, that's when we kind of got on the same playing field of like, hey, we're both adults now. And like, you're going to make your choices and decisions. I'm going to make my choices and decisions. We don't have to agree with it. But at the end of the day, like, we love each other. We'll still support each other. We'll still be there for each other. So yeah, it definitely took some kind of building up to it.
And Juhi,
Yeah.
to your point with like your siblings when they're younger too, with my brother, I think I personally think I was a second mother, but he doesn't see that because he was so young and doesn't remember like me having to take care of him and our parents just at the gas station, like but when we're older, he's just like, "Oh, you went off to college." He sees my college life and he's like, "Oh, you got to have fun while I was still at home, like and the home life, not being that
Hmm.
great." And I'm just like,
Right.
that's where we also butt heads, but I'm like, I'm trying to be very understanding and have conversations sometimes that I'm like, I did go through things too, like when we were
Right.
younger, but I have to control my temper in that because I get so frustrated. I'm like, did you not see, like, do you not remember me changing your diapers and stuff?
Right.
So it's like that frustration is something I work through too, but he's also understanding now. He's like, okay, I can come to you for things. He's like, "Okay, like, here's this girl drama or something." I'm like, "Okay, thank you. I can help you in that."
Yeah, it's definitely nice to have that like sibling dynamic and it transitions and changes in different parts
Right.
of life, right? Like same thing with me and my brother, it's very interesting being a younger sibling and an older sibling. Like I feel like I get the best of both worlds. With my brother, like it's so interesting because we always have these conversations about how, all three of us were born in the same household, had the same parents, but we see things so differently about our households and about our parents.
Right.
It's very interesting how, like,
Right.
being in the same household with the same parents, like, you experience totally different things. So, my last question is what advice would you give to anyone that's either struggling with their mental health or struggling with having conversations about their mental health?
I think my biggest thing is just know that you're not alone. You're not alone in this, like sometimes it can feel isolating, especially if you grew up in a family or culture like, we kind of explained, where mental health wasn't really talked about, but what you are feeling is valid. And I think growing up, that was something that I had a hard time understanding until I went to therapy, where they were like, everything you're feeling is valid. Don't let anyone ever invalidate what you're feeling. And, just because someone's not talking about it doesn't mean that they don't have their own battles. It may be the same thing, it may be different. You never know. But I would say just reach out, whether it's friends, family, somewhat a partner, a therapist. It might be scary when you're about to reach out. You may not know how to approach it or put it into words, but after sometimes just venting that little bit, you might just feel so much relief. I know that that was it for me. So, people are there for you to listen. You just have to see who you can talk to and who you kind of vibe with. And just my last thing would be just put yourself first. Like, don't be afraid to put everyone aside and do what's right for you at the end of the day. Go and do what you want to do for yourself. Don't follow what anyone else wants you to do at that point.
I definitely agree. And I think it's now 2025. We have so many resources available. So please take advantage of all that's available. Even in the South Asian community, I know we don't talk about many, but I know on SAMHSA's website, there's so many resources available. And kind of, I think holding back is like the biggest thing. Like you're scared, look at getting it right. Like honestly, screw it.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
everyone's gonna talk about
Yep.
everything. Like they love to just gossip and who cares,
Right.
because there's stuff going on all the time. You'll be a topic for 5 minutes and then they move on. So it's just like do what you need for yourself because no one else will. You have to take that step and that holding back of like being afraid sometimes it's okay. That's valid too. But there's resources out there and just having that conversation and with yourself as well. It's like trying to find out like what's going on, am I anxious? Am I going through a depressive state? Like what's happening? Then once you realize that and once you ask for kind of the right resources and once you're feeling better, you'll be like, "Oh, that was a breeze." That therapy
Right.
session I was so scared of, that was a breeze and it's helped so much. So I think it's really rewarding to talk about it and get the help that you need.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the two things I'll say is, it's a cliche and I know people say it a lot, but treat your mental health like you would any other injury. If you have an injury, you're going to go to the doctor, you're going to go to the hospital and try to figure out and get to the bottom of it and solve for it. Do the same thing with your mental health, And I think the second thing is people sometimes will start therapy and then maybe a couple of sessions in they either don't vibe with their therapist or they the trauma's coming up and they just kind of back out of it and back off. Try your hardest not to give up. Like just
Mhm.
keep going, keep trying, keep pushing through the sessions. If you really feel like the therapist isn't right for you, find another one. Wait until you find the right person, but don't give up because there's so much useful stuff that comes from therapy. And like Disha said, even if it's something that, it's a therapist that you don't really get along well with, you'll still leave with resources and like helpful tools and tricks on how to manage your symptoms and how to manage your day to day. So keep trying, do what you got to do, but put yourself first and take care of yourself.
Someone did come to me recently and they knew that I've been through therapy and I've had like 3 therapists in my life so far. And they're like, like, how do you choose a good therapist? Or like,
Mhm.
what's your recommendations, And the first 2, when I was going through different depressive states, they were like ones that I were just referred to and I was just, like a kind of assigned to them. So I didn't think of it as like, well, is this person right for me? I thought of it as this is what I need in the moment and I'm going to take it, And turns out they were a good therapist for that moment. And so it's like kind of like perspective thing that how you look at it, like I get some therapists are not going to meet your needs, but also if you're in need of it desperately in a way, or like if you're in that situation, look at it in a way that they are going to help me because they're a
Yeah.
licensed professional to do so.
And I think even, in addition to resources like therapy or counseling, like things like this podcast, like hearing other people's experiences, like I know for myself, like whether it was family, friends, or whether it was just like reading things online or like memes on Instagram, whatever it is, like it'll sit with you, like, and there's so many other ways to find support. I know the way that I got connected with Anjali was online. Who would have thought that we'd be doing this today, And I
Yeah,
have to say, like,
yeah.
thank you, because when I met you, like I was going through a very tough time in my life. And just sometimes even having, no, not even knowing the person really makes things easier too, because
Yeah.
you won't get that biased. Sometimes there will be a little bit of bias with the people around you. So sometimes when you go to someone that you don't even know, and I'm not saying everyone has to do this, right? But it works. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's worked for me, right? And I can say it has, and it doesn't hurt to try. There's
Yeah.
no reason to be afraid.
Wanted to advocate for medication if needed, seeing a psychiatrist. And so the difference between psychiatrists, psychologists do the therapy, I think, and psychiatrists can prescribe.
Prescribe the medication.
Yes.
Yep.
I am also a big advocate for that because mental illness is also sometimes an imbalance in your brain chemistry due to, like childhood trauma also can change that, and that's just like that's an injury to your physical body, it's our brain.
Yeah.
So I think also in the South Asian community, it's like, oh, do you really need anxiety medicine? And it's like, yeah, I sure do,
Right.
like to help me
Yeah.
calm down because nothing else sometimes helps, right? So
Yeah.
Right.
that's also something that needs to be advocated for because kids will come, like even with me and ADHD, in grad school, I had to start Adderall, and people are like, "Oh, Adderall," and I'm like, "Okay, but that makes me feel normal." Like,
Yeah.
I
Right.
finish a whole brain thought with being on Adderall and helps me get through grad
Right.
school, So I think the stigma around like medication also like needs to go away.
Definitely, 100%. I have an episode coming up soon on medication because there's just so much to unpack there. And yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think in our community it's very much, maybe it's because of like Ayurveda and how our
Mhm.
parents have grown up, but there's
Right.
so much emphasis on just getting things done the natural way versus medication. And on a personal note, like, I've been in therapy in and out for about 12 years now, and I've always taken pride in the fact that like anytime I'm depressed or anytime I'm, really in it, I've always pulled myself out with therapy. And a
Right.
couple of months ago, I was talking to my therapist and she was like, "In your week, out of 7 days, how are your days? How do your days feel? How do they feel?" And I was like, "Yeah, 6 out of 7 days are pretty hard. Like I struggle to get out of bed and I struggle to
Mhm.
like start work, and I mean, I do it, but it's kind of taxing on me, and I'm pretty tired by the end of the day, even if I've only just done work." And she was the one that recommended me to a psychiatrist, and she was like, "Consider medication because imagine having 6 out of 7 days being amazing, where you feel motivated and energized." And I was so upset by it because I was like, "Wow, are things really that bad for me that like I have to be on
Right.
medication now?" And during that time, I talked to my siblings, and my sister was like, "Look, it's the same thing that you had with therapy like 10 plus years ago, where it was introduced to you, and you were like, 'Oh, whoa, I don't need therapy.' But then you started it, and like now you're a big advocate for it. So, like, same thing with medication,
Right.
try it, see what it does. Like, it doesn't hurt." My psychiatrist is Indian, he's Gujarati. Like, there are South Asian professionals, so
Mhm.
they are available, and sometimes you'll need the medication. And hey, it's been amazing since the day that I took it. Like, it's been wonderful for me. It's been great, and I feel so much more energized, and I can get things done. I can get through my day without any issues. So, yes, sometimes you'll need it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And they're
Mhm.
professionals, and their
Right.
job is to help you, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, to your point, Anjali, I wanted to bring up that part about the South Asian part, like Gujarati or like South Asian in general. The first time I started therapy, it was a South Asian doctor, and he was like, "You need therapy, and it's okay to get therapy." And that just made me feel so relieved that like
Yeah.
in our community, like an elder is telling
Mhm.
me that like it's okay to get therapy because
Yeah.
like,
Right.
other people talk about it, I'm like, "Oh," like, I don't know, because our community just never has talked about it, or it's always
Yeah.
negative.
Right.
So, someone being
Right.
the first to kinda tell me, and I always thank him when I see him because I'm like, "I'm here because of you," I'm like,
Yeah.
made it,
Mhm.
through that
Right.
kinda time period because you kinda told me and advocated me to go.
Yeah, it makes a big difference hearing it from someone in your community. It's just like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this is okay now?"
Mhm.
It
Right.
gives you like that stamp of validation of like, "Okay, if he's saying it, like it makes total
Then
sense."
it's okay.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories and for being so open and honest and vulnerable. I'm glad that this is a safe space, and I hope anyone that watches this can relate to a lot of what we've said, can hopefully take away from this that, like you said, they're not alone. There are other people who are going through this. It's beyond just the three of us. There's so many people in our community that go through this and may not know what to call it or where to start or anything like that. But you're not alone. And I'm really glad that you guys were able to come and share your stories with me.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you. Thank you
Of
for opening up
course.
this platform.
having.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Awesome. All right. Well, stay tuned for the next episode. It's coming up really soon. That will be around men's mental health. And hopefully we'll get some interesting perspectives from the guys. Thanks, everyone.